Was the Civil War just a sibling spat over chores? Or something deeper? Let's be real. If states' rights were code for secret barbecue recipes, the war would have been fought with spatulas and mustard, not muskets. Plenty still buy the tale that the conflict boiled down to a polite debate over which level of government got to wear the boss hat, a high-minded food fight dubbed states' rights. But here's the brisket of the matter. The top right, Southern states guarded, was the right to keep people enslaved. As the nation gobbled up Western lands like it was Manifest Destiny's all-you-can-eat buffet, Southern leaders hit the panic button. Mississippi and South Carolina didn't mince words in their secession letters. Slavery was their hill to, figuratively, die on. The Confederacy then sealed the deal by weaving slavery right into their swanky new constitutions. All this talk of states' rights was mostly code for overriding federal laws that threatened slavery, not about Tennessee wanting bigger county fairs. If freedom means the freedom to enslave, that might just be the world's worst liberty badge. So next time someone drops, it was about states' rights. Remember, those states were mainly fighting for the right to deny rights. While the causes of the Civil War are debated, it's also a misconception that every Southerner supported the Confederacy. What if I told you Scarlett O'Hara wasn't exactly everyone's spirit animal south of the Mason-Dixon line? Sure, Civil War documentaries love to show Southerners harmonizing Dixie on their porches, but behind closed doors, plenty forgot the words, or were humming something totally different. The myth? Every Southern belle and good old boy was Confederate through and through. Reality's more like a Baskin-Robbins counter, with a whole lot more flavors. Take the so-called border states, like Kentucky, Missouri, and that feisty rebel West Virginia, so strong for the Union that West Virginia actually seceded from secession. Talk about a plot twist! Meanwhile, enslaved people and many poor whites weren't exactly lining up to die for someone else's plantation empire. Urban hubs like New Orleans sometimes leaned pro-Union, and thousands of Southern men threw their lot in with the Union Army. Secret societies and resistance groups popped up too, which makes you question Southern unity for good. Bottom line, the Confederacy wasn't a sweet chorus line, it was more like a boisterous family argument over whose tune to dance to. And don't even get them started on the eternal debate over sweet tea temperatures. Similarly, the motives and beliefs of key figures like Abraham Lincoln are often oversimplified. Did Abraham Lincoln leap into office waving a giant Emancipation Proclamation, ready to free every enslaved person with a dramatic flourish of his stovepipe hat? Spoiler alert, no. He didn't sport an abolitionist-in-chief sash either. The popular myth casts Lincoln as a lifelong one-man wrecking crew against slavery. But the real story has less Hollywood drama and a lot more political elbow grease. His early political years? All about patching the Union back together, preferably with as few bloodstains as possible. Not storming plantations and handing out freedom like candy. Lincoln's true debut as the Great Emancipator only took center stage when it served to save the country. The border states mattered more to him than any solo jailbreak fantasy. Publicly, he even threatened to tolerate slavery if it kept the Union intact. Calls for change came in lawyer-approved fine print, not thunderous speeches that make high school history teachers' lessons disappointingly brief. That famous proclamation? Tactical, not magical. Actual nationwide freedom didn't arrive until the 13th Amendment passed, after enough political arm-twisting to make a pretzel feel dizzy. Lincoln's journey from cautious compromiser to reluctant liberator proves real progress often comes in clunky, uncomfortable steps, not cinematic leaps. Additionally, misconceptions extend to major actions like the Emancipation Proclamation and its immediate effects. Picture Abraham Lincoln waving a piece of parchment and poof! Every slave in America is suddenly free, right? If only history came with a top hat, white doves, and a dramatic magician's flourish. Here's the not-so-magical reality. Slavery continued in the loyal border states and any Confederate territory already under Union control. Without Union troops to enforce it, freedom wasn't exactly being handed out like party favors. Lincoln didn't overnight those emancipation certificates. For many, freedom showed up fashionably late. Hello, Juneteenth. The real showstopper? The 13th Amendment, which slammed the door on slavery for good. If a magic spell could end slavery, Hogwarts would have solved it centuries ago. Alas, emancipation moved slower than a southern drawl on a scorcher of an afternoon. Beyond policies, it's important to understand the war's geographical scope, which was not confined only to the South. When you conjure up the Civil War, do you picture all the action unfolding beneath magnolia trees dripping with Spanish moss? Well, lace up your snow boots. Here comes the cold, hard truth. The classic myth: every battle was a Southern soiree. But before you start humming Dixie, let's set the record straight. Gettysburg, the war's bloodiest barn dance, is in Pennsylvania. Yep, Pennsylvania. More famous for cheesesteaks than steamy bayous. Locals call it definitely not Dixie. And the fighting didn't just stick there. Confederate raiders even crashed the Vermont party. Yes, Vermont, where the cows are better prepped for blizzards than bayonet charges. Maple syrup reserves? Suddenly under siege. Meanwhile, Kansas and Missouri, about as deep south as a tumbleweed in a snowstorm, burned with guerrilla warfare. Even Washington, D.C., smack dab on the border, had Honest Abe pacing the presidential carpets, nervously eyeballing the Potomac. So the only thing reliably Southern about the Civil War? The humidity. The conflict marched from the Gulf all the way to the Canadian border. A truly national drama, not just a Southern soap opera. Moreover, the makeup of the soldiers who fought was more diverse than often assumed. Think all Civil War soldiers looked like Abraham Lincoln's mustachioed cousins? Think again. Despite the sepia-toned myth that the blue and gray ranks were packed with nothing but white, clean-shaven men, the real armies resembled a 19th-century group project. Everyone reluctantly included. Over 180,000 black soldiers fought for the Union, proving the melting pot was bubbling well before Ellis Island got its stamp pad. Even the Confederacy, desperate in the war's messy final act, considered arming enslaved black men, an awkward family feud, and the historical equivalent of slapping a Band-Aid on a cannonball wound. But wait, there's more. Tens of thousands of Hispanic, Native American, and Asian soldiers answered the call on both sides, a fact that would baffle anyone whose history curriculum comes from Hollywood's one-note casting. And at least 400 women, yes, real-life Wonder Women, disguised themselves to enlist, defying corsets and conventions alike. If hoop skirts couldn't stop these warriors, tired old myths don't stand a chance in a world where yoga pants reign supreme. Pension files, muster rolls, and photographs tell a story Hollywood still hasn't caught up with, while history's already rolled its eyes and moved on, waiting for the credits to finally scroll. Battles such as Gettysburg are frequently highlighted, but the significance of each engagement varies. Was Gettysburg really the Beyoncé of Civil War battles, or just another hit single in a long, tragic album? History teachers in Hollywood sure seem to think so, crowning it the turning point. With all the dramatic pauses and swelling orchestras you'd expect, you'd swear Lee's army checked into the Gettysburg Hotel, lost their keys, and the South's chance at victory bounced permanently. But before you bet all your Union souvenir pennies on this remix, let's hit pause. The Civil War was basically the ultimate greatest hits compilation of misery and mayhem. Don't forget Antietam bursting onto the scene with its bloody debut, Vicksburg's relentless siege energy, or Atlanta's explosive chart topper. Each one left the Confederacy with more than just a paper cut. Gettysburg? Sure, it's a big deal, but more season finale than series finale. The South didn't throw in the towel after July 1863. The heartbreak and plot twists kept streaming for nearly 2 more years. If Gettysburg were a movie, its Rotten Tomatoes might read, important, but definitely not the only plot twist. Crowning it, the ultimate turning point is like picking a favorite flavor in an existential ice cream parlor. Deliciously impossible. In short, the Civil War, like any binge-worthy soap opera, thrived on cliffhangers, not grand finales. The reputations of commanders like Robert E. Lee also provoke widespread but nuanced views in Southern society. If you think every Southern attic houses a velvet portrait of Robert E. Lee, bless your heart. But hold your horses. The myth goes that Lee is the South's universally adored saint, serenely watching over a sea of biscuit-munching fans. Reality? Messier than a barbecue on a steamy July afternoon. Sure, plenty of Confederates idolized Lee like he was the Taylor Swift of the South, but not everyone signed up for the fan club. Discord simmered, especially among folks whose homes turned into battlefields, or who lost, say, all their pigs. After the war, Reconstruction poured vinegar on already raw wounds. Southern Unionists, formerly enslaved people, and civilians who'd suffered didn't just skip the Lee portraits. Some would have used them for kindling. The Lost Cause legend gave Lee a fancy new paint job, but let's not pretend every neighbor bought the makeover. If Lee truly were everyone's favorite, modern statue debates wouldn't need police escorts. Funny enough, even the horses weren't exactly enamored with his legacy. In the midst of war, medical practices were evolving, contradicting the belief that all treatment was hopeless. Picture Civil War doctors as medieval barbers with aprons that looked like crime scenes. That's the classic image. But is it true? Most folks envision wartime medicine as a grisly circus, rusty saws flying, bearded men shouting, "Hold him down," while someone sneaks suspicious herbs into the whiskey. The myth casts battlefield surgeons as accidental butchers, armed with blunt tools and blind courage. And those field hospitals? Think tents fueled by sheer panic and hygiene policies best summarized as meh. Here's the twist. Anesthesia wasn't some pipe dream. Good old chloroform and ether were the norm in most surgeries. Sure, these doctors didn't know about invisible microbes. Pasteur was still perfecting his mustache. But their expertise was no accident, and survival rates were surprisingly decent. Amputation was pretty much the Civil War's version of "take two and call me in the morning." And thanks to triage and organized ambulances, countless lives were saved. So next time your uncle claims Civil War surgeons just guessed and chopped, remind him, at least they figured out whiskey isn't a disinfectant, despite what desperate patients swore by. The perspectives of those who fought, including Union soldiers, were complex and cannot be simplified as purely abolitionist. Were all Union soldiers fiery abolitionists, or did some just enlist for the perks of the blue uniform? Picture this, a sea of blue coats, each supposedly ablaze with passion for freedom and justice. Or was half the army thinking, "I'm mainly here for the apples, steady pay, and maybe that snazzy forage cap"? The myth casts every Northern recruit as a zealous anti-slavery crusader. In reality, motivations were a mixed bag. Patriotism, peer pressure, wanderlust, or let's be honest, dodging farm chores. For many, the rallying cry was "Save the Union," not "Free the enslaved." Actual abolitionists were around, but they'd fit comfortably around a modest campfire. When Lincoln dropped the Emancipation Proclamation bombshell in 1863, the Union's official mission shifted. But soldiers' minds didn't change overnight. Their letters bristled with homesickness, hardtack complaints, and sometimes painfully tangled feelings about emancipation. By war's end, though, seeing slavery up close convinced more bluecoats. This fight was about more than apple rations and dress codes. The journey from myth to messy reality? It's a march of human complexity, not an anthem of noble unanimity. Technological differences between the North and South also challenge simplistic comparisons of progress. Was the Confederacy basically fighting tanks with pitchforks and moonshine? Let's unpack that Civil War tech myth. Popular legend casts the South as knee-deep in mud, barefoot, wielding Grandpa's rusty butter knife, while the North rolled out robotic eagles and Gatling guns every 5 minutes. But hold your mint juleps. History had fewer corncob cannons and a lot more nuance. Sure, the Union boasted superior railroads, factories, and serious firepower. If only the Confederacy had spent more time laying tracks and less perfecting brisket, who knows what might have happened. Still, the South wasn't a technological Jurassic Park. Both sides wielded cutting-edge gear, rifled muskets, ironclads, and for the truly daring, the HL, Hunley submarine. Less stealth commando, more underwater death trap. Supply chain headaches? Absolutely. Fewer resources meant Southern creativity was crucial. Blockade runners and DIY repairs flourished. The tech gap was real, but despite the rumors, no cavalry charges on armadillos occurred. Despite the hardships, soldiers faced fear and moments of desertion, challenging heroic portrayals of unwavering bravery. The myth of the fearless stoic soldier, striding into chaos like it's just another Monday morning meeting. Legend paints every warrior, from medieval knights to modern GIs, as strolling into battle blissfully immune to fear, powered by little more than a mild caffeine buzz and a can-do attitude. Marching in with zero fear? Only if you're talking about a marching band, not a battlefield. In reality, even the boldest soldiers have felt their hearts jiggle like jelly at the whistle of arrows or thunder of cannons. Roman legionaries, samurai, even Viking berserkers, they all tangoed with anxiety and probably woke up drenched in nightmares. Desertion and crafty avoidance weren't mere signs of cowardice, but rather a profound respect for staying unstabbed. Commanders threw everything at the problem: pep talks, terrifying threats, stirring speeches, drummers pounding away, and rations so questionable they should have come with a hazard warning. Truth is, most soldiers stayed in line not because they were made of steel, but thanks to camaraderie, relentless drilling, and, when all else failed, sheer blind luck. If fear didn't exist on the battlefield, war movies would be sponsored by meditation apps, not action figures. The war's conclusion at Appomattox was significant, but did not mark an entirely clean end to conflict. If only history wrapped up its battles as neatly as a TV season finale. Enter Appomattox, the mythic curtain drop on the Civil War. The popular image? General Lee surrenders to General Grant. They exchange polite bows, sip a calming cup of tea, and presto, the war's over. If the Civil War were a sitcom, Appomattox was more like the mid-season cliffhanger, not the final credits. Stay tuned for the chaos reruns. Here's the unscripted director's cut. Lee's April 1865 surrender was indeed a showstopper, but plenty of Confederate armies in the Carolinas, Alabama, and Texas either missed their exit cues or flat out ignored the memo for weeks. Some generals were like kids at a sleepover who just refused to go home, even when the cops, aka Union troops, show up. Guerrilla skirmishes and outright chaos dragged on as authorities desperately tried to herd the unfinished drama, while tens of thousands of Confederate soldiers played hide-and-seek or dreamed of escaping to Mexico. So when it comes to clean endings, Appomattox wasn't a graceful fade-out. It was more like spilling coffee on white jeans. You can pretend it didn't happen, but the stain's there to stay. The aftermath wasn't a bow-tied piece. It was a gritty pilot episode for Reconstruction, turning every Southerner's life into the ultimate plot twist. Following the war, Reconstruction efforts attempted to address deep issues, but fell short of complete resolution. Reconstruction, the post-Civil War magic trick supposedly turning bitter conflict into a nationwide kumbaya moment. If only. The popular myth goes that the North and South grabbed sweet tea, shared a group hug, and instantly wiped away centuries of tension. Think happily ever after, but with a side of awkward glances over the Mason-Dixon line. In reality, Reconstruction's grand promises were about as solid as a sandcastle at high tide. Federal policies aimed to rebuild the South, but Southern states responded with a unanimous "no thanks" and a generous helping of subtle sabotage. Sure, African Americans won freedom and theoretically the right to vote. Paper ballots met creative roadblocks, plus the rise of black schools. But white supremacist groups and restrictive black codes crashed the party like uninvited guests, with Jim Crow already lurking nearby, taking notes. Congress kept hitting reset, but the South just kept pounding the undo button. By 1877, the North packed up its troops and optimism, leaving Reconstruction's progress gathering dust. Honestly, if Reconstruction had a Yelp review, it'd be a brutal 1-star, would not rebuild again. The deep scars it left set the stage for civil rights battles stretching across generations. Healing a nation? Turns out, way harder than patching a paper cut. Even the visual documentation of the era, such as photography, came with limitations affecting clarity and bias. Imagine scrolling through Instagram and stumbling on a Civil War selfie. No filters required, right? Picture it. You, a cannon in the background, a 60-second exposure, and zero duck face. But hold your hashtags, because popular opinion claims Civil War photos are crisp, authentic slices of history. In reality, early photographers basically invented stand still or vanish. Anything that moved, even soldiers, explosions, or that one guy sneezing, ended up history's first accidental blur filter. Forget action shots. Every photo was less battlefield chaos, more strike a pose, soldier. Grumpy troops were forced into dramatic, statuesque stances. Thought your family's awkward photo day was rough? Try holding a stoic grimace while someone adjusted your hat, your rifle, or, occasionally, someone else's entire body. Props, and sometimes corpses, were shuffled around for artistic flair. Photoshop didn't exist, But let's make this look cooler was definitely a thing. Despite the blurs and biases, these haunting images shaped public perception. Proof that history isn't always crystal clear, but it sure packs a punch. Finally, though the Civil War occurred long ago, its impacts and lessons remain relevant today. Ever heard someone say, "The Civil War? That's old news, let's move on." That's like insisting your Wi-Fi password from 1865 still works. Spoiler alert, neither does, and pretending otherwise just leads to awkward family reunions and missing emails. Some folks treat the Civil War like ancient history, but let's get this straight. Ancient history is what your grandpa calls his high school football glory, not the 1860s. The truth is, the end of the Civil War shaped pretty much everything. Race relations, the strength of the federal government, and yes, even whether you slather vinegar or tomato on your barbecue sauce. State pride, don't ask? Still think it doesn't matter? Try bringing up voting rights, flag debates, or stubborn Southern stereotypes without tripping over Civil War echoes. From statue-toppling dramas to curriculum showdowns, those old battles keep making headlines. Pretending the Civil War is irrelevant is like deleting your browser history and thinking all your problems vanished. Ignore its impact, and you're the one napping through a fire alarm just because it sounds a little dusty.